Do you remember when something called the Mueller Report was released several years ago? This was during Trump's first term. What happened in America at the time is especially significant now because of a new big screw up by the media. So we need to look back quickly. At the time, special counsel Robert Mueller was looking into Russian interference in the U.S. electoral process, and specifically in the 2016 election. Mueller completed his report, but before the public learned what was in it, Trump's then Attorney General, Bill Barr, released his own alleged summary. From there, everything went off the rails. All of this recrimination and people making tons of declarations and attacks on each other. There were tons of op-eds and all these guests being interviewed based on what the Attorney General claimed about the Mueller report, not the Mueller report itself. You might wonder why that's suddenly relevant now. Well, last week, the media did the same thing all over again, but this time with bigger global consequences. It did that with Iranian propaganda. In the process, the media also showed profound hypocrisy. Today, I'll take you through how the media slams the Iranian government for propaganda until it likes what the Iranian government is saying. Then, no propaganda to see here. Let's just treat claims as news and help Iran convince billions of people all over the world to believe stuff. Ahead, you'll hear the same news agencies conflicting with themselves in an attempt to pull this off. And that's not all they've been doing wrong. There's another angle to this involving social media, Elon Musk, and Russia. I'll explain. Meanwhile, the other day, a friend of mine, someone I was on air with many times, always enjoyed working with, said something to me that is so significant and made me realize that I need to address it on this show. This person pointed out that they had been certain places and seen certain things with their own eyes. That right there gets at the heart of one of the biggest problems in the media. What do you learn from going to a place, and what do you not learn? No one stops to think about this, but we need to. That means addressing parachute journalism and a question journalists ask each other in videos and audio reports that I can't stand because it summarizes so much of what's wrong with this kind of reporting. It gets at the heart of a fundamental flaw in today's news operations. All that plus the giant lesson the media is missing from the election in Hungary, NPR's unforgettably awful admission, and the media's hypocrisy around destroying a civilization. Coming up today on They Stand Corrected. Hello and welcome. So great to have you here. My name is Josh Levs, and this is my podcast, They Stand Corrected, which fact checks the news. I spent 20 years in mainstream media, 10 on NPR, 10 on CNN. You can learn all about me at my website. I've always been passionate about fact checking, and I saw during my years in the media how much the media itself needs to be corrected. But no one was doing that until now. I take a lot of cues from you all. I hear from people asking me lots of questions, sending me links to fact check. Recently, I crossed the 100 episode mark, thanks to listeners who are making this possible. As part of it, a bunch of people sent in messages, and there were so many, I've been spreading them out across different episodes. I'll tell you one great thing about having this show is that I've gotten to know new people who found this show and then got in touch, and we've gotten to know each other. Some of them have then launched their own podcasts on other topics. I joke that these days having a podcast is like having an email address. And in a way, that's a fundamental irony of this show, I guess, because I talk all the time about how there's too much content. But this is here to cut through all the noise and give you the truth. Anyway, one person who went on to launch her own podcast sent in this audio message.
Hi, I'm Joelle Kaufman, host of the Kicking Cancer's Ass podcast and an avid fan of Josh Levs and They Stand Corrected. They Stand Corrected is the only podcast I've listened to every single episode. It provides a framework for how to understand what you're hearing when you hear or read the news, how to critically assess it, and determine if you're getting the truth, facts plus context. Josh Levs is the fact checker in chief. and he makes me and all of his listeners better citizens, better consumers, and infinitely more informed.
Thanks, Joelle, and thanks to all of you for your support. The best way to support the show is to get the newsletter. It's free, packed with links and tons of great stuff for you, and this cool feature where you can click something and it will automatically create social media content and images for you. You can even highlight any piece of text and it'll do that. You'll find the link in the show notes. It's on Substack, and for paid subscribers, there are perks, including extra content and more. Stop paying for legacy media that is failing to give you the truth and come join this community instead. All right, let's jump into this. Lots of listeners have contacted me about a CNN reporter named Clarissa Ward. She gets tons of stuff wrong. She has pushed propaganda. She even contributed to a dangerous and repugnant phenomenon of people videoing children eating dirt instead of stopping them from eating dirt, which any ethical person would do. Anyway, that was in a previous episode about Stephen Colbert stuff. But now I have a clip to share with you that she is in. Last week, Trump announced a temporary ceasefire involving the war in Iran. This one segment I'm going to share with you has so many problems with it that I'm going to break them down. So let's start with this.
Mohammad Ghalibaf, he is the Speaker of Iran's parliament, a former IRGC commander.
She doesn't mention in there that the IRGC is listed as a terrorist group by the United States, Canada, the European Union, Australia, and others. That's context, but let's listen to more.
Has taken to X and put up a post where he essentially goes through what Iran views as 3 violations already of the agreement between the U.S. and Iran, the ceasefire agreement, which he frames in the context of the 10-point Iranian plan.
Then she goes on and on with what this Iranian official claims about these alleged 10 points, and then ends on this.
Right to enrich uranium.
This was emblematic of what legacy media was doing in general. Here is what actually happened. Trump announced this temporary ceasefire and said there would be a 10-point plan that they would work on and negotiate within some framework. It was nebulous. Iran then rushed to release what it said the 10 points were. And the media reported on that as though Iran's claims have any legitimacy. Then anything that happened in the wake of that, the media started saying, this is a violation. It's a violation. Like when Israel continued to fight against Hezbollah in Lebanon. Let's piece through the many things that are wrong with this. First, these same news agencies tell you not to put any faith in what Iran claims when they don't want you to. Here was the same network, CNN, reporting previously on what the Iranian government was saying about CNN.
Has there been any response from Iranian authorities?
Well, they've continued much of their uncomfortable propaganda against my team, against CNN.
They know Iran pushes propaganda. They complained about it being on X, formerly known as Twitter. I did an episode about this previously. Big media have gone after Elon Musk for letting Iran and other state propagandists post freely on X. Here are a couple clips from an NPR segment a few years ago.
Twitter just lifted its barriers on state media accounts for Russia, China, and Iran. NPR's Derek Kerr looked into how government propaganda is spreading as a result. And
I spoke to 2 former employees who told me that Twitter made the deliberate decision to stop visibility filtering on state media accounts in Russia, China, and Iran. And now the fear is that those state media accounts can start spreading virally. This could lead to more government propaganda and misinformation across the platform.
And now NPR is quoting Iran posts from X. I'm looking at a story of theirs right here, quoting and linking to an X post from the Iranian government. This is today's media. It's propaganda when we can blame the political right. It's news when it helps our arguments on the political left. The news should be neither. It should just be truth. You can say, here's what Iran is claiming, and you can provide the context about this person being from a terrorist organization and the fact that Iran lies constantly. No wonder more people than ever are identifying as political independents. There's no home for them in this media ecosphere. This hypocrisy over propaganda is only part of the problem. There's another big part. And that is where we get into the Bill Barr stuff. The media needs to learn lessons from its big screw ups. Back in March 2019, the big story was the Mueller Report. Special counsel Robert Mueller, a former FBI director, had been appointed to investigate Russian interference in the 2016 election and any ties to Trump and Trump world. The full redacted report ended up being 448 pages long. But before that was released, he sent it to then Attorney General Bill Barr, who at the time was still a Trump loyalist. Just like so many other former Trump people, that relationship did not last. Anyway, at the time, Barr was in Trump's corner. So before anyone could find out what was in the Mueller report, Bill Barr went public with his own spin, extracting certain points he liked and basically smushing them together to make Trump look as good as possible and make Democrats look as bad as possible. The media ran with that. There were tons of headlines about the Mueller report that did not adequately emphasize that the media didn't know what was in it. The headlines were everywhere. And by the time details came out, a lot of people had clear images in their minds that this report had simply exonerated Trump in every possible way. Later on, word even came out that Mueller himself had major problems with Barr's spin and wrote to Barr at the time saying so. Here's a clip about that from CNN.
For weeks, all we had was that 4-page summary from Barr, which seemed to clear the president entirely. At least that's the way it was portrayed. Well, tonight we're learning that the special counsel had serious concerns about that, serious enough to write his old friend, the attorney general.
So the lesson is that before you know what's actually in something, don't rush to report what someone untrustworthy with their own agenda is claiming about it. Just make clear in every possible way, especially in headlines, which way more people see, and quick updates, who is claiming something and that they have a clear agenda. You can say that in one sentence. You can say that what they're claiming might be false. That brings us to this moment. The media took what Iran was claiming about this alleged 10-point framework, and the media ran with it. That is why we have seen hundreds of headlines saying things like Israel violated a ceasefire by attacking Lebanon. Now, mixed in with all that reporting, you can find examples of times that they said that there are different takes on this. But if you look at the headlines and the big picture, what you see over and over is a rush. I've heard from people saying this is what the 10 points were, and I asked where they got that, and they said the news. I looked at those reports, and those reports were based on Iran's claim. The idea that that was one of the 10 points is strange in and of itself, because the same people trying to claim that Lebanon is independent and should not be attacked as part of the war in Iran, these same people are now tacitly acknowledging that Iran speaks for Lebanon. Meanwhile, they're not telling you that Lebanon is factually home to Hezbollah, a massive Iranian proxy terror group that has long had an arsenal and terrorist force bigger than that of the Lebanese military. They also should have emphasized that Hezbollah keeps indiscriminately attacking Israeli civilians. That does not make the front page, but when Israel is accused of killing civilians in its targeted strikes within Lebanon, that is all over front pages and main pages of websites. It's also hard to find in almost any of these reports the fact that Israel contacted civilians in Lebanon in advance of its attacks on Hezbollah infrastructure. There is an activist who said something about this, a trans activist, Brianna Wu, who has had no problem calling out the extremists on the left. And what interested me about this post was how many people out there are agreeing with it and sharing it. It should be a wake-up call to the media. Brianna wrote, if Americans had media that could do its effing job, we would be having a national conversation about how a Hezbollah splinter cell just tried to slaughter American children at a synagogue, and we would be standing as one regardless of party. That is a reference to the recent terrorist attack on a synagogue in Detroit, in which this man tried to kill all these Jewish children. The media kept pointing out that he had relatives killed in Lebanon, in Israeli bombings, as though somehow that justifies anything. And the media did not make clear that those relatives were part of Hezbollah. This was definitely a Hezbollah-inspired terrorist attack in the United States. Speaking of that, I have news for you about NPR and what they did. That's coming up. But first, what does a journalist learn and not learn from seeing something with their own eyes? This is something big that the media refuses to acknowledge.
Extra, extra, read all about it.
News used to spread like this.
Extra, extra, read all about it.
But in this era, it comes at us from all directions all day long.
Some breaking news.
Officials are investigating.
Breaking news.
More updates coming soon.
And so many people are weighing in with opinions and theories, spewing uninformed nonsense all around us. It's like we're caught in this cacophony of noise. Big media is a big part of the problem. They're getting more desperate to be heard in all that noise and setting aside journalism to say, hey, pay attention to us over here. Humans are not designed to be overwhelmed with information like this. It's mentally unhealthy. This show aims to end that. I think of it like coming along with a triangle and saying, let's all take a deep breath and focus on truth. For this block of time, all that noise is gone. Together, we focus on facts plus context, so we can make decisions in the world based on what's really going on, not what liars want us to believe. That is the blueprint for every episode I produce. If you value that formula and believe it should reach more people, please consider supporting the show at whatever level works for you. Find out how at the link in the show notes or at my website, joshlebs.com. Your support makes all this work possible. There are people who live in America who have no idea that ICE has been doing any of the things it's doing. There are people who live in certain parts of America who think that America is filled with anti-ICE protesters everywhere you look, from the mountains to the prairies. You can be in or go to a place and leave just as clueless about it as you were before you got there. You can also go to a place and become more clueless about it because you can get radicalized while you're there. Simply going to a place does not give you authority on anything beyond what you actually see. Journalists need to understand this in a literal sense, and I can tell you, very many don't. There are important things that come from on-site reporting, but those things are useless if you're not first, above all else, deeply committed to fighting for truth, fact-checking everything you're told wherever you are. Propagandists long ago figured this out. If you want to spread lies, one way is to get journalists to come where you are, be the one to guide them around, and have lots of people tell them the same story. They'll never fact-check it. They'll broadcast what they're told to the public as though it's factual. And that is a giant power of non-democratic governments. When people don't have freedom, when they risk the death penalty for speaking, when they can be arrested at any time as political prisoners and tortured for saying anything other than what their leaders want them to say, what they're sharing with you is especially untrustworthy, no matter how many do it. This came up the other day when an old friend of mine, we used to be on the air together, mentioned having been in certain places, saying, I know what it's like because of what I've seen with my own eyes. Journalists do this a lot, grant themselves authority they don't actually have. I very rarely talk about where I've been because I know there's no inherent authority in that, unless I'm describing something I saw. On this show, I've played you dozens of reports from people in the field, on location, spouting lies. There are multiple causes of this. One is referred to as parachute reporting. This was the topic of a discussion at something called the International Journalism Festival. Here's a clip from a guy named Paul Miles discussing the term.
Journalists, news crews, documentary makers who fly into a place and grab some pictures quickly, grab some footage, go out when they've got the quotes they need and don't necessarily feed back to the communities.
I've seen tons of parachute reporting over the years. People fly to a place and rush to do their first bylined report from there, or call in, or if it's video, do their first live shot. And they just say what they already believed before they got there. This happens all the time. And that's just one of the causes. There's another one that's more tricky and insidious. Journalists are trained to believe and act like they know more than they do. And that includes a pretense that being somewhere automatically imbues them with some magic level of knowledge about the whole place where they are. This is why there's one question that I just can't stand that journalists ask each other all the time in audio and video reporting and sometimes in print. Here's one example. Actually, this is from inside that same Clarissa Ward segment on CNN.
And what is the mood like there in Riyadh as a result of this? Obviously, the Gulf allies have borne much of the brunt of Iran's response to this.
The day started here, and there was such a palpable feeling of relief. People felt that a catastrophe had been averted.
The mood. Thanks for speaking for the 8 million residents of Riyadh. By the way, Saudi Arabia was on the verge of joining the Abraham Accords, a big step forward for peace in the region, when Iran had Hamas launch the October 7th massacres to prevent that from happening. Lots of Saudis want Iran's government destroyed. Maybe that's somewhere in their mood. But like I said, this happens constantly. When I went to pull up clips for you, I literally found thousands. Here's a random one from PBS.
Well, what's the mood of the people? What's the mood of people both in Gaza and in Israel?
I think there is cautious optimism I'm hearing on both sides, in Gaza and in Israel.
The mood, the one mood. If you are with a relatively small group of people for a few hours, you can probably claim that there's a general mood in that room. But this whole idea of speaking for a mood in a country, I know it might seem harmless, but it sends the message to the reporter and the audience that the person who is there knows more than they do. And that is a dangerous, slippery slope. That's what propagandists take advantage of. This idea that once you are somewhere, the thing that you come to believe in your own mind is now a fact. It's an opening for propagandists to use you. I did an episode here about this author, Ta-Nehisi Coates, who is adored by progressives. He talked about how he had visited an area referred to as the West Bank and how one area was so different from another and therefore something apartheid. At no point did he explain that what he actually did was leave an area controlled by Israel and enter an area controlled by the Palestinian Authority. If you or I leave an area controlled by one government and enter an area controlled by another government, guess what? It's going to be different, including a sudden lack of democracy and freedom because the Palestinian Authority refuses to offer that. But propagandists won him over on this trip. He wrote exactly what they wanted him to. Journalists need to get literal about what they're seeing. For example, they might see destruction and people tell them stories about how it happened, but they don't fact check it. They don't know what happened. Then they report and pretend that they know what happened and even start to believe it themselves, just like they start to believe that they know the mood of millions of people. Now, does any of this mean journalists should not go places? No, of course not. They should. It's crucial. I have called on news agencies to send people to non-democratic nations everywhere, especially in Africa, to cover the hellish terrorism there. Be there, cover it, meet people, talk to people. No matter what you're told, no matter where you are, fact check it. Always fight for truth. Question everything. Look for evidence. It is that simple. Coming up, NPR admits it did something unforgettably awful, and what you need to know about media and the fight for civilization. As a rule, I don't do social media battles, and I encourage other people not to as well. They're generally just a waste of time. But social media can be a great tool to get people truth. In fact, social media is an important tool to fight back in the mimetic warfare and influencing brand connectomes, two things you've heard about on this show. You can find me on social media. On most of the platforms, I have my name. And since I am no expert at creating pretty graphics, I am happy to say that a listener to this show is now helping me with the content I'm sharing on Instagram. He is at Gabe Draws, Gabe Draws. He is awesome. Thank you, Gabe. So, if you are on social media platforms, find me at Josh Lebs. You will see that sometimes somebody posts a lie and I reply and I say, that's factually untrue. Here are some facts. But that's not a battle because I don't go back and look at whether they even replied to that. So not wasting my time on that. Focusing on putting this together for you. But I see your shares, your likes, the way you amplify that content, and it helps drive the audience for this show. So let's hook up there on social media platforms at Josh Lebs, JoshLevs. You've probably been hearing a lot of talk in the news about Hungary, the elections there. Here are just a few of the headlines. Orban was first, Trump is next. Viktor Orban's defeat is a roadmap for beating Trump. Trump's humiliation in Orban defeat stunner is only just beginning. Here is what the news should be telling you. Viktor Orban, prime minister, lost to a conservative challenger. Peter Magyar is avowedly conservative, not considered far right to the point of wanting authoritarianism, as Orban is considered to be. Trump did support Orban, but news agencies should be telling you the crucial context. There were liberal candidates who tried to run, but the people of Hungary were not having it. I'm looking at a story here from the Associated Press on the PBS website. The headline is, Orban's election loss has ripple effects for Trump and U.S. conservatives. This story does not mention that Magyar, the winner, is conservative. I checked it 3 times. Nothing. Meanwhile, I mentioned NPR earlier. After the terrorist attack in Michigan, in which an Islamist guy with links to Hezbollah rammed his car into a synagogue while there were all these children inside, NPR sent someone to do a sympathy piece about him from Lebanon. Oh, this poor guy had family members killed there. Never mind that his family members were Hezbollah terrorists. But here's what has come to light now. NPR's public editor wrote a long piece defending NPR's coverage of a bunch of things. In there, buried inside it, so you have to search for it, she mentions something about NPR's coverage of the terrorist attack in Michigan. Quote, NPR ran multiple stories on the attack. In all of that coverage, voices from Temple Israel are absent. I couldn't find any stories that quote rabbis, congregation members, or the families of the children who had to flee the building. That should be shocking, but it's not. This is today's big media for you. It didn't occur to them to do any stories with people who were the intended victims of the terrorist attack. By the way, that attack was so big that more than 50 law enforcement officers needed medical treatment afterward for smoke inhalation. I'll put links about all this for you in the newsletter. Mainstream news giants are structured now around ignoring the threat of Islamist terror and building sympathy for the terrorists. That brings us to civilization. There was a lot of understandable disgust over Trump posting on social media that the United States would attack Iran in such a way that, he wrote, a whole civilization would die that night. Then he announced the temporary ceasefire. What he wrote should be called out. The media was all over it, condemning him for it. And yet, these same news organizations regularly, just about every day now, justify calls for ending another civilization. Literally. That is what, quote unquote, anti-Zionism is. The call to end Israeli civilization. The civilization of the people of Israel, also known as Judea or Zion. Anti-Zionism is a call to reward empires, reward areas built through the Arab Islamic Empire, and declare that a tiny Jewish civilization must be destroyed. We live at a time with rising dangers from the left and the right. If there is a lesson from the Hungary elections, it's that voters don't have to give in to either extreme. They can vote for someone committed to democracy and against the extremes. As always, I want to know what you think. There are two great ways to contact me. The best is through the newsletter, and the second is through a form at my website. I see every message, and I appreciate every message. Before the music runs out in this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the show. That will get the algorithms wherever you're listening, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else, to recommend the show. And think of one person you know. Send it to them. Say, I think you will learn from this. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you next week.